Oh, gosh. It's bright and it's hot. And I'm back in the garden. Oh. The last time I was properly in the garden was the 1st of August. It's the 22nd today, 3 weeks later. Fortunately, on the 1st of August, it was the day I filmed the garden tour. I did a few jobs and I did a massive harvest. I had my granny trolley full. I also had a few bits in my backpack too. I say fortunately because it was actually that morning I was thinking, I just feel a bit wonky in my bones. And the next day, when I was going to come back to the garden, it was the next day when I got up and I really had a big twinge in the bottom of my back. And I thought, no, don't risk it. So that naughty back kept me out of the garden for 2 weeks. And after about 5 days or so, Gary messaged to say, are you okay? Haven't seen you in the garden. So I messaged and said, yeah, I've got a little twinge in my back. It's nothing major, but I just don't want to risk being in the garden. He said, do you need any shopping doing? Bless him. I was like, no, I've got mountains of food. Oh, thank goodness for the harvest. So, yeah, I popped back very briefly, a week and a couple of days ago to do another bit of a harvest. And I was a little bit like, the garden needs quite a bit of work. So coming today, honestly, I feel a bit overwhelmed. I feel a bit sort of, I'm sharing this because I'm sure many of you will recognise it. I feel a little bit like I've gone back to square one. There's so much work to do and all that kind of stuff. And we've had a lot of rain days, but it's been kind of like more like drizzle rather than rain. The ground is bone dry. I really needed to have done some watering in the last 3 weeks, so some of the plants look like they're actually dying back. Dead already. Loads of things have bolted. That's really disappointing. A lot of the fennel have bolted. They've just been dry and hot. So, on the upside though, yay, finally, when I was down a week and a couple of days ago, I looked at the tomatoes, got lovely big bunches hanging down, loads and loads of fruit. Still not a single ripe one, my goodness me. However, here we are, 9 days later, and there's loads of ripe ones. Yay! So I'm going to have my first pick of tomatoes on, what did I say? It's the 22nd of August. Goodness me, so I'm going to do that. But what I've done initially is, I knew it was going to look bad because I'd been here a week Sunday ago for that harvesting. When I was down for the harvesting, I didn't have much time. It was like, focus, do what you need to do. I'm aware of the mess, just don't look at it too much. Get your harvest and get out of here. So what I've done today is, look, I've had that initial kind of like, oh no. But now it's time to set aside that kind of panic, overwhelming, disappointed, whatever feeling. Go around the garden, assess where everything's at, and make a plan of action. And as always, I think I mentioned this when I came back in August, no, at the end of July, when I'd been away from the garden for nearly 4 weeks. I've got my priorities. My priorities are always going to be harvesting and plants, looking after the plants. Today that means a lot of water, for example. But yeah, harvesting and the plants. Then, when I know that I'm on top of those two things, then I can think about weeding, trimming the grass, doing all my tidying, all sorts of little maintenance jobs which are outstanding. I've got to take care of the communal path that's behind my fence and deck, all sorts of things like that. But honestly, right now, if I try and think about all of it at the same time, it's way too overwhelming. So, let's start with some harvesting. I'm going to go and harvest in the Calendula bed, and I'll chat a little bit about ideal harvesting and less than ideal, and I'm sure I'll have examples of both when we get up there. So come on, grab a garden stool. I'm going to grab mine and my secateurs and something to put my harvest in. See you at the top of the garden. Gosh, it's way hotter than I realised it was going to be. When I got up, it was quite grey and cloudy. Anyway, right, well, I have had one harvest already from the Calendula, but goodness me, they're going over quickly, and I think it's just because it's for lack of water. Oh, sorry, we're a bit breezy as well. I'm going to have tickly hair. So, I'm going to be doing as much deadheading today as harvesting. Never mind. After today, I think in terms of deadheading, I won't deadhead anymore. I'll let whatever else goes over then be for seed saving for the following year. So that can all come off because that's all deadhead. Now, in terms of when's the best time to do your calendula harvest? When the flowers first open. I don't mean in the morning as opposed to then closing up in the evening. I mean let me see if I can get a couple of contrasting ones to show you. These two, as you can see, they probably opened a couple of weeks ago, and they're almost, they've lost all their petals and they're turning into their seed heads. So when I say when they're first open, I don't mean at dawn, I mean when the flower is at its sort of freshest. In other words, you know, the moment after it's been a bud and it opens. Morning, afternoon, whenever you've got time to pick them. But try and pick them when they've just opened. I brought my trog over here. I'll just sit it down there for a second. The reason for that is, I mean, it's like if you think about your vegetables, you pick them when they're at their firmest and freshest. You don't want them when they're sort of wrinkly and squashy and going over. When they've just opened like this, that's when all those wonderful sort of medicinal properties, all those fantastic oils in them, that's when they're at their strongest. So we get more bang for our buck from the petals like this in terms of our healing balm when they're brand new. Saying that, I can't find one very close to me or within reach. No, I'll show you on this one anyway. This is for deadheading. When they're like that, I'll still have those petals because there will still be a little bit of potency in there, but just nowhere near as much as when they're first open. It's the same principle for any of your flowering herbs that you're growing for the flower specifically. So chamomile, perfect example. When you're harvesting your chamomile, whether you're using it for tea or, you know, other things, pick it when that flower first opens because that's when it's at its most potent. Yay! And when I do pick, it's going to take me so long, goodness me. It depends where I am in the season because towards the end of the season, frankly, I get bored and lazy and just pull heads off. But at this stage, what I will generally do is on each flower, I'll go down the stalk. So I've got my flower there that I want to harvest. I'll go down the stalk as far as it will go before it truncates to another little branch, because that other little branch may have a bud on it. In this case, or in that case, it didn't, so I can follow the stem all the way down to the next bit of sort of bifurcation. Those are both dead and gone and on their way to making seed. So I've cut it right down, and at the base there I've got, I don't think you can see, it's too low, but there is a new little bloom there which I'll have off, but right next to it there's a bud. So I'm just going to take the flower, leave the bud. And by doing this, it just encourages the flowers to keep coming. I don't want to be right in the middle of one there with massive pollen sacs on its legs. I don't want to be anthropomorphic about plants, but let's just be anthropomorphic for a minute. The plant's kind of main thrust in life, what do I want to do in life, is to produce seed. That's what every plant in our garden is, what it wants to do. Most of those seeds in the vegetable garden, they're contained within the vegetable, aren't they? If you think about it, the beans, tomatoes, the squash, whatever it is. So that's the plant producing its seed, its next generation. Yay, plant's done a good job. By deadheading all of my plants, hopefully what it encourages the plant to do is put up a whole load of more flowers, because suddenly it's lost all its seed capability. So yeah, that's why, I mean, with any flowers, regular deadheading should keep prolonging your either harvest, if it's something you're harvesting, or your display. And let's face it, we want our flowers to go on as long as possible, don't we? But then yes, like I said, after this pick today, after this deadheading, from now right through to sort of the end of October, beginning of November, I will harvest some of the blooms, but mostly now any that go, I will leave a whole lot to go over for seed saving. And I may let some of the commercial ones go over for seed saving. These are the ones that I bought this year, but I will definitely let my own go over for seed saving, because year on year on year on year they've just been brilliant, fantastic for me. That's going to go right the way there. Once I've picked them all, we'll take them back to the shed and I'll show you what I do with them in order to dry them, because that's what I want now, is I want them to dry. When making oils, balms, that sort of thing, it's always better to use dried flowers than fresh, because fresh flowers can actually just go mouldy in whatever liquid you've got them in, whereas the dried ones, they shouldn't. I've never had dried ones go mouldy, so they shouldn't. Also, just in terms of, you know, the time of day, I suppose ideally the morning, but once the sun's up and the flowers have been encouraged to fully open, so you can see which ones are fully open, but also to let any dew on them evaporate. We don't really want to be putting these all in the shed with a load of dew on, because again, there's a danger that they'll just go mouldy. And even if they don't go mouldy, going musty, yuck. But it's like anything in the garden, isn't it? There are so many black... I always say, there are very few black and white in the garden. There's a lot of grey area. Yes, ideally I would harvest these at about 9 o'clock in the morning. However, I couldn't get here for 9 o'clock. So then you ask yourself, well, is it better to not harvest at all, because I can only harvest at 2 in the afternoon? You know, so that's the point. You've just got to make that judgment for yourself, that, you know, even if other people say to you, oh, you it's like watering. We've talked about this before. Some people say, oh, you mustn't water in the morning because the sun will evaporate it all. You mustn't water at midday because the sun will evaporate it. You mustn't water at night because it encourages the slugs out. The fact is, if you can only get to your garden to water it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's better to get some water on it at 2 o'clock that day than no water at all. It's like my garden really, really needs water. So yeah, don't be too preoccupied with when you do this. It's more about, really, it's about just doing it regularly and trying to catch those blooms when they first open, when they're at their most potent. Okay, so for now I'm going to, it's going to take forever. So all the ones I'm deadheading, they'll need chopping up a little bit more. They're going to go straight in the compost. The ones that I'm harvesting, I'll take to the shed and show you what I'm going to do with them next. But that's going to be in about an hour of my time. A couple of seconds for you. Trying not to stab the spider webs. You can see it is a painstakingly laborious job, but worth it for the goodies. What I've decided is this, this is the bed of my own saved seed, and the far end of this bed up there, the plants did so well. They were the first up. They've been really good, strong flowers. So to make life a little bit easier for myself, I have harvested the blooms from that end, but I haven't dead-headed that end. I've actually decided I'm going to start my seed saving now. Sorry, gaping top. Yeah, I'm going to start my seed saving now. So there's about 1.5 square metres-ish that I'm not deadheading, that can all become seed. And also at that end I've got a nice mix of the beautiful bog standard officinalis, my bright orange single petalled ones, and up there I've got some of the lovely almost cream ones. Yay! So now, in other words, when I say that I'm making things easier for myself by doing that, what I mean by that is, so now until the end of the season, the rest of this bed and all of that bed is just harvest, 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 harvest. If there's an occasional dead head, whip it off. Hopefully we'll get more blooms. And I don't need to worry about, oh, am I saving enough seed? Yep, the end of this bed, that will be enough. I mean, I may get to the end of the season and decide I want some more, but at least I've got that lot earmarked. That's the main thing. And this is what I mean about cutting down carefully, because I can actually see tons and tons of new little buds. Oh God, it's a bit awkward though. Oh, right. Someone go and make a nice jug of ice cold lemonade, eh? That's what we need on a muggy day like today. It's much, much later in the day. Oh, my little rocks on the table. It's about 4 hours later, if not more. Yeah, certainly it got like Piccadilly Circus in the garden. That's a reference that some folk might not know if you're outside the UK. Piccadilly Circus is an area in London. It used to be a little roundabout right in central London. It's now partly been pedestrianised, but it's still it's a busy little spot in the middle of London in the West End. Yeah, if you sit at the statue at Piccadilly Circus, you'll see the world and her husbands and missus and whatever go by. Yes, anyway, yeah, it suddenly got really busy, and after I'd finished doing the calendula picking, plus some deadheading, etc., I sort of sat for a moment and I was looking at the garden again, and I thought, you know what, I was going to get stuck in on the tomatoes today, all sorts of things, but I thought I have to water, and I have to do let's get started. I have to do a really thorough water, because I mean it was almost as if plants were dying in front of my very eyes. So I've actually spent about 2 hours on the watering, plus, like I said, lots and lots of folk around this afternoon, and that's been lovely, and everyone's been coming over to say, hey, are you all right, are you okay, because I haven't been around for ages. Some folk knew because we're in touch outside of the anyway, lots of chat, how lovely. But now suddenly it's gone really quiet again. It's about, I don't know, 4:30, 5 in the afternoon. The sun is going to go, my shed is already in shade. I'm just out the front of my shed, And I thought, oh yes, let's have this beautiful little bit of dappled light to sit in whilst I get stuck into this job, which also will take a while. So I've wilted and dried almost already. Oh, and just to say very quickly, I've grabbed this one because it made me laugh. Look at the size of that beetroot. Can you see? Can you see it in the light? It's an absolute stonker. Just caught my eye as I was coming down the path now, and I thought, you're coming out, I'm having you for me tea. And after I've finished the watering, my friend who brings me the puzzles, the mind puzzles, had put some under my shed door, great, and she just handed one to me, it's today's one. So I just started doing one of the puzzles because I'll need to rest my knees before I do the walk home. But what could be more perfect? Oh, work and talk. What could be more perfect than processing this calendula harvest and then doing a puzzle, just sitting enjoying the quiet and enjoying being outside in this gorgeous, gorgeous warm air. It's been hot today. I don't know what, I think it's about 25. I know for some folk that's not hot, but compared to a lot that we've had this summer, it feels hot. So I don't want to go home. I don't want to go indoors. I don't want to do any more work, that's for sure. It may seem like not much, but honestly, watering finishes me off. So, yeah, finding ways to be in the garden without necessarily having to work. Now, all I'm doing with the calendula flowers, I've got my bit of Tupperware. I'm just gently pulling the petals off, normally in one fell swoop, popping them in the Tupperware. This will come home with me. I'll put it in my front window. It's not in direct sunlight there, but it's warm, it's dry. They'll dry in no time. The thing with calendula, they're so sticky. What is it that's sticky with the calendula? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, so there's not a soul around. Oh, that's bliss. So quiet. All those people who say to me, oh, I don't know how you can live in London, it's noisy and filthy and horrible, la la la. Welcome to my London. Someone's going to start banging. I think someone's in their kitchen, probably starting to get the tea ready for the kids coming home from... Oh no, it's the holidays, isn't it? Maybe the kids are coming home from summer clubs, like football clubs and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, look, today arriving in the garden, I'm a bit, initially, honestly, a bit dismayed and a bit discouraged. But as I've sat here now for a few minutes, I'm just reminding myself to just practice a bit of gratitude. Remember how lucky I am to have an allotment. That's the first thing. I'm really lucky. Remember how especially in May and June, how actually all year really since I got back at the beginning of May, but how important this garden has been to me this year in terms of just a place to come and be, and sometimes laugh, sometimes cry, sometimes deep in my own thoughts, sometimes to come for company. Yeah, it's been really important, so I'm so grateful to have it. And it looks like some of the crops have gone over before I've had a chance to harvest them, so I was looking, there are some beans which have dried out already, and they're not beans that I wanted to be dry. It looks like, I think nearly all the fennel has bolted, so it'll be no good. That's a real shame, real shame. I haven't given up yet. I'm going to have a really close look to see if there's anything I can rescue. So yeah, beans have dried out, fennel have bolted, my summer sprouting broccoli has bolted and blown. Trying to think what else. A couple of the chard have bolted. The spinach is all bolted. When I say bolted, I mean it's run to seed. And once a plant runs to seed, generally the taste is compromised in some way. So for instance, things often taste bitter after they've gone to seed. Or say with the fennel, what happens is the flesh becomes really tough and unpalatable. So yeah, having things bolt, i.e. run to seed, it's not great. But again, let's count blessings. The tomatoes, can't wait to show you the tomatoes, look fantastic. The squash, amazingly, haven't completely died. They've been in drought, basically. So it looks like there's going to be some good squash. The beans that have dried, well, I don't normally like to have them dry, but I can still harvest them and just use them as dried beans. It just means a bit of extra planning with cooking. So I think on the whole, in terms of harvests, I should still be happy and still be super grateful, which I am. Right, this is so sticky. It's the one bit with the calendula that I don't like. It's funny, isn't it? Some children are like that as well. Some kids, really little kids, like sort of under 4, preschool age kids, they can get really obsessed with not wanting mucky hands and sticky hands and not wanting to put hands in. And it's me, 50-something-year-old woman. I don't want sticky hands. But it's worth it for the magic that comes later on with these beauties. It's going to take me quite a while, so I think rather than burbling on about nothing to all of you, I'd quite happily sit and burble on though. This is the sort of job that is lovely if you've got friends around. Do any of you, I'm sure some of you do, entertain your friends on your allotment? It's a nice place to entertain, isn't it? The only problem is when you're on your allotment, you tend to want to do the work, don't you? You see the jobs that need doing. So maybe do something like this, because then at least you can still sit and be with the friends you're entertaining and you're still getting a job done. But in the absence of that today, I'm going to enjoy a rare moment of real quiet, apart from the wind soughing or soughing in the trees. I was going to say, I always say soughing because it's spelled S-O-U-G-H, I think, but someone said it's pronounced sough. So the wind is soughing in the trees. The clouds are just languidly making their way across the horizon with a lot of blue sky up there and a dog barking. Perfect. Make the most of these, make the most of summer. It's going to be gone soon. I'm not even going to think about that. I'm not going to think about summer being over soon. I can't bear it. Let's catch that. Can I catch that in the light? I want to find some light to make it glow in. Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? Once they're dried, they go into the oil. And I love that sight of the jar of oil because it's summer in a jar. So even if I don't get around to making any oil and balm till the winter, the dried petals will store perfectly well. Yeah, to have a jar of it on a windowsill in the middle of winter, oh, it's lovely. Okay, right, now I'm really waffling. I will see you all again soon. Undoubtedly back in the garden. There's a lot to do, but I think what we'll do as well, I can't wait to show you the tomatoes. We'll do a tomato harvest, we'll do some tomato cares. I've forgotten what else needs doing, but we'll do it next time. We'll continue to make the most of the fine weather while we have it by having another garden session. So, until then, from a very, very sticky-fingered me, please look after yourselves, look after your gardens, and if you've been away for a while like me, you might have been on holiday, yeah, don't panic. Let's just remember all that there is to be grateful for, because there's a lot. Until the next one, cheerio. Gonna be here till midnight. Fine by me.